Welcome back to another THI roundtable discussion here on TarHeelIllustrated.com. And if you're watching us on our rapidly growing YouTube channel, that is called Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI publisher Andrew Jones, and joining me is our director of football recruiting, an analyst for all sports, and our absolute jack of all trades, Miss Deana King, and our budding jack of all trades, Brandon Peay, who is becoming a regular at UNC basketball games by my side, making sure that AJ doesn't clank into anything and actually knows what the heck he's doing. So, guys, we're going to talk Carolina basketball here. The Tar Heels over the last week, since the Duke game, kind of did a nice job distancing themselves with the mess that was the Duke game. But in a way, it's kind of more the same. I was talking with somebody last night about this, and I said, maybe they grew some since the Duke game. And they say, guys, this is just a wash, rinse, repeat thing. They play somebody really good. They get pounded. They recover and beat the teams they're supposed to beat. They're as predictable as any team in college basketball. So my question to you guys is, are they that predictable? Is this a team that simply can't beat the good ones, but takes care of the middling bad to bad teams? And that's kind of what we're going to see moving forward. Or do you think something that occurred this past week hints at a possible change of direction for this team, that maybe, just maybe, when they play a good team, especially on the road, they'll have a chance to compete and possibly win that game? Deana, why don't you start it off?
Well, I've seen some growth, especially, Brandon did an article about the bench. I've been kind of high on their bench play here lately. I mean, with the emergence of Dontrez Styles, the athletic kid he is. I mean, he brings some much needed energy a lot of times. And Kerwin Walton seems like he has found his stroke here lately. And Puff Johnson, I tell you, Andrew, I say he's like go gadget, what Inspector Gadget, because he just seems like the ball is attracted to somehow Puff. I mean, he's like, he gets a lot of garbage baskets under the goal. The ball just finds him everywhere. But yep. I think after being blown out by Duke, they did bounce back and play Clemson in a really good game. And Little John, as you know, is not been very kind to UNC. I mean, it's always a tough place to play, and they come and they won that game, and then they just annihilated Florida State, put them out really early. But until they get that that big win, I don't know. The jury's still out. The jury's still out for me right now.
Brandon, the jury may still be out, but did you see anything in the last week that makes you think perhaps they're a lot closer to maybe being a little bit of a different team, positioning themselves to win one of those games? And we'll find out Saturday in Blacksburg. I think that's one of those games. Or is this just more of the same? We're just going to have to wait and see. And it's kind of foolish to project that possibly the tide has changed a little bit for this club.
Well, one thing that I did find encouraging, and I'm going to piggyback on what Deana said, is like the solidifying of the bench. When we did our staff picks this week, one thing I noticed is everybody in the starting five got it. By the way, if you want to see our staff picks, go to TarHeelIllustrated.com, only $8.33. But when we did our staff picks, everybody in the starting five
got the promoter.
Yeah. When we did our staff picks, everybody in the starting five got at least one vote. So what that tells me is that unit, they're playing with cohesion, they're playing with chemistry. But I think one thing the Tar Heels started to do this past week is they started to solidify that 6, 7, and 8 spot off the bench. That Dontrez Styles, Kerwin Walton, and Puff Johnson, those three, they really started to get normal minutes. And I know Dontrez Styles came in. He was the first sub in Florida State. And the score was 18-1, but he did come in at the 13-minute mark, which is a normal time for the first sub to come in. I don't think the Tar Heels planned on being up 18-1 or whatever the score was.
It was 18-0 when he came in. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think they planned on that being the score, and I wonder if that was the plan all along, to get him in early, or if Hubert Davis saw that they were up by so much, so he saw opportunity to get him in. I don't know. But I do think the fact that he got early minutes and he was able to play through some mistakes. I think he had 3 turnovers in the first 5 minutes that he played. He was able to play through those mistakes and he ended strongly. I think that's encouraging because someone like Dontre Styles, he gives UNC something that they just simply don't have. He gives them athleticism, some bounce, and I just think he can get comfortable. He'll make the overall team much, much better. So I think that's something that UNC fans should be encouraged by, and we'll see what happens in the coming weeks.
Well, since you guys decided to go in the direction of the bench, we'll stay there for a few minutes. Was it solidified or was it just opportunity? That some guys got in a little bit early against Clemson, and I think that Hubert recognized they needed a little bit of a jolt because they didn't play well the first 10 minutes of that game, and then Armando started taking over a little bit, and then they hit some shots and they closed the half strong against Florida State. It was situational. This is devil's advocate here. It was situational. They were up so big he could afford to put them out there. There was really nothing to lose. Or do you think that Hubert is seeing something different in Dontrez, different in Kerwin, who, by the way, we scored 16 points in 31 minutes last week, or what? I mean, was it situational or was it solidified? I think it needs more than 2 games, guys, to be solidified. I think we're going to find out what the real rotation is in the first half in Blacksburg, because that's a must-win game. That's a potential NCAA tournament elimination game for neither team has a Q1 win.
Mm-hmm.
Hokies are 0-5. Carolina's back to 0-7 because Michigan got throttled over the weekend. Unless Michigan, by the way, sidebar for a moment, and we'll get into this in a few minutes, but Michigan has 7 games left. 5 are Q1 games and 2 are Q2 games. So the Wolverines are going to sink or swim here in the next 3 weeks, and they're also going to either help or hurt the Tar Heels. So back on topic, I think we find out what the rotation is Saturday. I'm not sure anything's been solidified yet. Brandon, what do you think?
So I will say I don't think the rotation was solidified this past week, but I do think last week was a step in the right direction of solidifying the rotation. I think it was after the Clemson game, Armando Bacot praised Dontre Styles for – he said that he got screened and Dontre Styles stayed in front of his man just for an extra second. So he praised him for paying attention to the scouting report, knowing that play was coming. And I imagine if Armando praised him in the media, I imagine he got praised behind the scenes when they were reviewing film. And I think little things like that's what's get the light bulb to go off in the freshman's head. And if like someone like Dontre Styles can get that light bulb to go off, and then his athleticism is more apparent on the court, then I think they'll solidify another spot in that rotation right there. Like that.
Deana, when a teammate acknowledges something that the average fan would view as subtle like that a player did, to me, that's an indication that player wasn't doing that before. And I've tried to casually tell our readers, and I say casually because I don't want to make it sound like anybody's getting beaten on, that one of the reasons that Dontrez and DeMarco haven't been playing is because they weren't up to snuff defensively. And the fan just wants to see the bouncy athletic guy in the court. Well, let him play. He'll figure it out. But if he hurts the team or if he's not ready yet and you haven't earned that spot, coaching is going to put you on the floor. You played college basketball. I'm sure you understand exactly when Armando said that, you're probably thinking, yeah, I had my moment where I either switched properly or I fought through a screen properly or I denied in the post properly. And when the coach thinks that you've got it, you're going to get on the court a little bit more. Did Dontrez have that moment at Clemson? And did Armando alert us that Dontrez had that moment?
I think so. I mean, this group need leaders in Armando, Leaky. If one of those 2 guys starts praising some of the younger guys, it just builds confidence. And I think we're seeing Dontrez's confidence increase. I mean, Brandon said, he had some turnovers, but I think Coach Davis can live with some kind of turnovers. And that's just youthful. That's just him trying to use his ball handling, and he's not out there to dribble around, But Coach Davis has to the play that he's seen from Dontrez. And getting back to your earlier point, I think without Dawson there, that puts a lot more pressure on Armando and Brady. And Armando has picked up, he's been in some foul trouble. So the bench is going to have to play some minutes, because if they can, they can move people around. We've seen them when Armando's foul trouble, put Brady basically at a 5 and can use Leaky, and now Dontrez as a 4 out there. So, both of them are athletic, and a lot of, you don't see many of the, a 2 post player offense. So it worked out at Clemson. So it just basically probably out of necessity that Hubert
Armando's averaging
with those guys.
Yeah, it looks like you broke up for a second there. I think Armando's averaging at 1.2 more fouls a game since Dawson left. So they need somebody not only just to spell him, but also to take some of the load off. I think that's more it. I think Armando could handle 37 minutes, but it's 37 minutes of banging. It's 37 minutes of fronting. It's 37 minutes of trying to push a guy off the blocks. If you could pull some of that away from him and he doesn't have as much contact down there, and you can have someone else go in there and do a little bit of dirty work, someone else go out there and be a part of rebounding. I think Dontrez can be a really good rebounder. He's a guy that can eat up some space. He's a guy that when he boxes out, he can hold his box out because he's strong. He's got a good base. And he's also a guy that, sort of like you were talking about with Puff, I think that there's a nose for the ball thing that he has. And that it comes in real handy around the basket. That's something Armando has. So I think he could be an asset in that department. Going back to what you just mentioned, Deana, about some of the ball handling mistakes, and Brandon alluded to it as well. I was actually very encouraged for Dontrez that Hubert didn't take him out, because he looked really uncomfortable with the ball at times the other day. But Hubert let him play through it. And people wanted these moments to occur in November and December, but they didn't. And Hubert has his reasons for why they didn't. We can second guess all we want, but we're not in practice. We don't sit there and watch these guys' skills all the time, but we have seen him in the game. And I don't think Dontrez has really looked all that smooth offensively in games yet. So there are reasons why he hasn't been on the court, in addition to maybe some of the defensive stuff. But I think building confidence in a kid is also letting him stay on the court when he looks uncomfortable, letting him stay on the court when he makes a mistake. Because I wonder if some of those mistakes were, holy crap, the ball keeps finding me. It's midway through the first half on national TV against Florida State, and he's just got to work through that. How much do you guys think that was a part of that? And do you put it in evaluation on Hubert letting him play through those things on the court? Brandon, we'll start with you.
Well, I think obviously we're not in practice, but I think his play in practice must be at such a high level that Hubert Davis now feels comfortable allowing him to play through those mistakes, because now I think he knows behind those mistakes there is that athletic kid that can jump with anybody and rebound with the best, and he feels a much needed void ever since Dawson Garcia decided to go back to Minnesota to be with his family. So I think Dontrez Styles coming along. Yeah, that's what I think. I think Dontrez Styles coming along will be very good for the team. And I think once he's more comfortable, I think the turnovers will go down. I think the mistakes will go down. And I think his overall production will go up. And I think it will stay steady once he gets to probably that 8.6 rebound mark. I think he can steady out at about that pace and really help the Tar
I think that they would be totally thrilled if he got that. He'd also have to be on the court for at least 15 minutes a game, I think, to come close to getting those numbers. Deana, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd like to build on what you guys have said. He just gives them a different body type out there. He fills out the Carolina uniform. We've said that a lot. He looks like some of those guys that they used to have a long time ago. One I told Andrew, maybe he's a little bit better at this moment of time, but David Noel is a guy that he makes me think of, and if he can turn out to be anything like David Noel at the end of his career, that's going to be something. But just I mean, I'm a big believer to throw them out there and let them take their lumps. I mean, I think the leash was a little bit longer since they did have that big margin against Florida State. It did not really hurt them, and it was I think it was huge to let Hubert let him keep playing and everything, and just a lot of this stuff is rhythm. You can see guys that they need that rhythm of getting minutes and just get the blood going and the sweat going and everything, and just need. I mean, what is it? The 20? How many games have they played?
25.
25. And here he was getting his biggest action and getting into the game earliest that he's ever had in his young career. So, and playing in the Smith Center, I mean, the kid's been around a lot of good basketball. He's from Kinston, so everybody in North Carolina knows what has come through Kinston. So the basketball stuff is there for him. He knows, and he loves North Carolina, and he wants to strive to be one of the big time players. So I just think it's been a slow process, and he's growing as a player.
I think the plan and the expectations are that he will be well ahead of where David Noel was. I mean, David was a preferred walk-on basically his first year at Carolina, and he was on the floor at the end of the national championship game, by the way, in 2005, but he wasn't a producer, a stat producer until his senior year because he had other guys around him. I think they expect Dontrez to be a guy who produces next year. And I believe there's more upside to his game. Kerwin Walton is somebody that started last year. I think his first start was at Georgia Tech the night that Roy benched Caleb, Leakey, and Garrison, trying to send a little message there. And I think it worked in some respects. And what really got Kerwin going was the win over Kentucky and Cleveland when he hit some threes in the second half that were crucial in a Carolina run that kind of lifted him over the Wildcats that afternoon. But Kerwin has had to adjust more than anybody, I think, this year, because what his role is when he gets on the court, I think Hubert's wanted it to be the same as it was when he was on the court a year ago. The problem is, in Kerwin's mind, he's had to deal with trying to squeeze in a 26-minute performance last year into 8 minutes and 10 minutes and 12 minutes this year. And that's tough for anybody to do. And we have been at the games. We have seen Kerwin work and work afterward. I believe I can't remember which home game it was. It was about 2 weeks ago they had a home game. And afterward, Kerwin was still on the court grinding almost 2.5 hours after the game ended. And he went through an actual one-on-one type workout. He had somebody with him that was working with him, sort of a mentor. He went through a full throttle drill, and the drill was not shooting. It was all the things that we see in games that we've known he needed to work on some. And what I thought was a real positive sign the other day is that those ball handling drills, we saw the left-handed drive in the lane, and we saw the crossover that got him to the basket as well. And Brandon, I pointed that out to you when he did that. Like, okay, that's that work paying off in a game. And I think for him to connect those two things, to connect that moment when he's sweating his you-know-what off 2 hours after a game is over and having that moment connect on the court in an ACC game against a club with the culture and past resume that Florida State has was a huge moment. And on top of that, guys, 31 minutes, 16 points for Kerwin this past week. He looked like Kerwin Walton. He looked like the guy we saw a year ago with a little bit more added to his game that I just alluded to. How important, Deana, is Kerwin Walton to this team moving forward as a guy who can come in off the bench and hit shots? And by the way, he's got a transition 3 at Clemson and a transition 3 against Florida State. I think that's a big part of what this team needs moving forward.
Well, you just had to go through an adjustment period, like you said, starter last year had to accept his role and find his role. And I think right now he has a better understanding of what his role is. His job is to go in there and hit some shots. I think Hubert would love for Kerwin to contribute 6 to 8 points, and he can do that. I mean, he can do that basically in 2 shots, because he, that 3-point shot is his bread and butter, but, throw in a little drive. I mean, when he drove that first time, I was like, wow, those drills that we saw in AJ and Jacob's post-game videos are working. So anything, I mean, basically any kind of points they get off the bench is huge for Carolina, because the iron 5 they have right now, if they all score in double figures, and then you got Dontrez giving them 6, Kerwin 6 to 8, Puff 5 to 7, and if Justin McCoy, if he can get his, his game going, because
I think it's
that's
the minutes
that's another
points.
guy that I guess we need to speak about, is because he's a a big play. He can play in the post, and a good defensive player. So, but I like the positive moments of Kerwin. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay, Brandon. Staying on Kerwin, I think with Dontrez and with Puff and McCoy, I think it's the minutes. I don't think it's the stats they provide. I think they've just got to provide minutes in which there's not a significant drop. They got to defend. They got to move. They got to be a part of what they're doing. They can't, drift into the lane and get in the driving lanes, causing problems for Caleb and RJ, et cetera. For Kerwin, I think that his minutes are going to be more valued by the production he can give them. A catch and shoot 3 in transition every game would be enormous. And by the way, you notice that the Heels got to the rim more in transition the other day. It's because they've hit some catch and shoot 3s in transition. So there's more of the floor teams need to defend in transition. This has not been a great transition team, but Kerwin, he didn't have to get to the cup. He could just plant, catch, and shoot. I think that's something that this team could really use. But I think his value is definitely more in putting some points on the board and just being someone that must be guarded when he checks into the game, because I think that the other guys are more about energy and just taking minutes off the starters. But someone off the bench has to produce. And I think Kerwin is the option number 1 of being someone that can produce off the bench.
Yeah, I agree. I think every good Carolina team has that guy that comes off the bench and is pretty much the 6th starter. He gives you starter production, gives you starter minutes. And I think Kerwin Walton, he was a starter last year, so we know he has to play those starter minutes and give you that starter production. He's one of the best shooters in the country. And obviously Hubert Davis wants to get him on the court, because if you have the luxury of having one of the best shooters in the country, you have to find a way to get him on the court. However, Hubert Davis did tell us in his press conference that he would like to see Kerwin become more of a complete basketball player. And you guys mentioned him driving to the hole, but I don't know if you remember against Clemson, they went down by 1 in the last 3 minutes, and he got the ball and he did a quick behind the back dribble and then shot a mid-range shot and gave them the lead back. I think they need someone. He seems, his demeanor rarely changes. He's pretty even keel, and I think that's something that this team could really use in the down the stretch of games when things get a little tight. Someone who's going to be the same whether they're winning or losing.
It's funny you bring that play, because that is also, when I've seen him working out after games, he's not out there just raining threes. He's working on. Deana, you played. Brandon, you played sports. Anybody that's watching this that played like at the high school level in basketball, when coaches always told you, when you're working out on your own, don't practice the stuff you're good at. If you're uncomfortable shooting from the left baseline in the corner, shoot that shot, work on it, make it more comfortable, less uncomfortable. Kerwin wasn't shooting threes in any of the things that I watched. He was working on that specific move that you're talking about from Clemson. And because of that work, it's gotten more comfortable. Remember last year, they routed Louisville at home, but in that game, Kerwin had a couple of 1 and 2 dribble buckets where he dribbled once or twice to create a shot, and people are like, oh my goodness. And we talked to him about adding that to his game. Well, when he does it now, we're not so surprised. So his game, even though he's not starting, even though he's not playing as much, we're seeing signs that his game has developed. So if something were to happen and he was thrust back into a starter's role, I think he would be a better player than he was a year ago. There's still certain elements of his game that need work. He's got to be a better passer. He telegraphs his passes sometimes. He's got to be better defensively. That's what Hubert, I think, is talking about when he talks about him being a more complete player. But offensively speaking, in terms of getting buckets, I think he's a better player now than he was a year ago. And I think that that's huge moving forward, Deana.
Yeah, because basically his game last year was stand behind the 3-point and be ready, catch, and shoot. And he showed a lot of his different, his mid-range game, his driving game. So to get more minutes, you gotta improve your whole game and be out there to be. People talk plus and minuses. You want to have more pluses, so you don't want to be out there and have lots of minuses and everything. So I mean, and like Brandon said, got to have a dependable guy to come in and give them a spark off the bench. And what big way is Kerwin coming in there and knocking down a 3 in transition to get the stuff going. So I agree with you guys.
Puff Johnson hit a 3 against Florida State from the right corner. He's got a couple threes this year, and it's a more fluid looking shot than I recall from a year ago. I also think a lot of that's just confidence, because guys that aren't confident kind of rush the shot. So the release isn't great. The follow through is not great, but guys are a little bit more confident, a little bit more patient. Things are a little bit slower for them. You see more fluidity with what they do. But the thing that I've been impressed with about Puff, and I say this by also noting that, a birdie suggested for a while, a couple of times before he started playing again, that he was probably going to redshirt this year, but things changed. The Anthony Harris unavailable, then Dawson had the concussion, and he never really regained who he was before the concussion, and Puff's thrust in the lineup and he's produced. But more than that, I love the way he moves on the court. He moves like a confident guy. He moves like a guy who belongs out there. And last year, he kind of looked out of place at times when he played. I think he played 51 minutes before the injury, and he looked young. He looked like, man, I don't know. I mean, I think the one moment I remember which he looked really good was he had a bucket against Iowa at Iowa. And I was watching him after he scored and ran up the court, and I thought, okay, that's a really good moment. That's an I belong type moment. But we didn't always see that a year ago. From the minute he first checked into a game, I believe it was Georgia Tech, Virginia or Georgia Tech, he's looked like a guy who thinks he belongs. He's comfortable out there. The off factor is way, way, way behind him. And he's somebody that I think could do a lot of the little things to help this team in whatever minutes he gives. I was surprised he only played the last 3 seconds at Clemson. Maybe there was something situational there, and we'll have to give Hubert credit for that, because we don't really understand fully yet Hubert's philosophy about substituting. We'll figure that out over the course of time. But when Puff gets in the game, from an intangible standpoint, I don't really think there's much of a drop-off, and he has shown an ability to put the ball in the basket in a few different ways. Brandon, when you watch Puff Johnson go into a game, what are you seeing?
What I'm seeing is a guy that comes in and has consistent effort. He's consistently giving it his all. And I don't think his impact is seen in the box score quite yet, but it will. I believe it will. The more he stays on the court and the more he does those little things, like take that charge against, I believe it was Florida State. He took a charge, maybe took one against Clemson too, but like taking charges, diving on the floor. He's much more, he's playing like a guy that doesn't have 4-star talent, but he does have 4-star talent. So when that 4-star talent starts to come out and he starts to knock down more shots, and along with all the other stuff that he does, then you can start to see why people were saying he could be better than his older brother. You start to see why.
He took a charge at Louisville that Hubert made a point of pointing out after that game. And it was almost the same exact kind of charge he took against Florida State. Like I said, there is an intangibles thing there. Deana, when Puff was being recruited, and especially last year when people were disappointed because he wasn't Cam yet, Of course, Cam didn't become Cam until he was the Cam that we know now, until he was about 22 or 23 years old. A lot of people are saying, well, he's only ranked that high because his brother's Cam Johnson, without realizing that Cam Johnson had 2 offers coming out of high school, Iona and Pittsburgh. And the Pitt offer was because he's a legacy, because his dad played at Pitt and he's from right there outside, right near, his home, I think, is not too far from campus. Puff was much, much higher rated than Cam. And the people I've talked to, and I know some people that are close to the Johnson situation, as you guys well know, they've all believed that Puff has much, much more upside. Now, I'm not placing that expectation on him becoming as good as his brother. Nobody saw Cam being this good, okay? His dad at one time said, I think he could be an NBA player. That's why he's coming back to North Carolina for his senior year. And I remember thinking, Cam, an NBA player? But we saw by the following November, okay, this guy's got an NBA future. I have no idea if Puff does or not, but there's a lot of game there, and there's a well-roundedness into his early repertoire that makes me think that he could be, and I hate to steal your moniker, Deana, a jack of all trades guy as he continues to grow and develop at Carolina.
Well, the key to Puff is just to stay healthy. We're finally seeing a healthy player out there. I mean, this is his second, third year, and he's been riddled with injuries. So we're finally getting to see a healthy Puff Johnson, and I think it's kind of really cool to see him out there on the court with 3 seconds left against Clemson. Shows that Hubert has just a lot of confidence in him. And I like I mentioned earlier, I think Puff he's that player that most Carolina fans are like, dang, the ball always just seems to go to him. He's just in the way, or I just think his length and his ability just is the reason that he was out there. I mean, they took Brady out, I believe, didn't they on that last play?
Yeah.
Because they needed just guys out there that could defend. And
he's quicker and springier than Brady. Yeah. That's what you need in the middle of the floor there. Puff has an IQ, basketball IQ. He's got an instinct. He's got good instincts for the game. So those are things that are not going to go away. So as he develops other aspects of his game and becomes a more complete player and contributor, it's going to be very interesting to see where that ceiling is at Carolina. Deana, you brought up Justin McCoy. And by the way, if you haven't figured it out yet, we're talking about the bench in this discussion. We had no idea we were going to the bench. We just let it. This is as organic as you could possibly be. But you mentioned Justin McCoy, and I do want to hit on him a little bit as well. I think there's a lot more to Justin McCoy's game than we've seen. I believe that of all the guys in the team that are struggling a little bit, either with role or with confidence or whatever, I have a strong opinion that confidence is not great with him right now because he hasn't played and maybe as much as he thought, and he hasn't played that great when he's been in there. He's made some mistakes, hasn't been the same guy that Tony Bennett inserted into the lineup last year. People need to remember he averaged 11 minutes a game last year on the ACC regular season champions. Tony Bennett said repeatedly that when he would use Justin, it would be to get some toughness on the floor, to get some rebounding on the floor, to have a defensive presence, the guy that defended the baseline area, that pack line defense, defended the baseline area very well, a guy who would muck it up some and had some skill. And he scored a lot of baskets in the paint on loose balls, offensive rebounds, that kind of thing. And we haven't seen that guy 100% yet. There have been a couple of times where we're saying the flashes, but it hasn't been a consistent thing. Would you guys agree that of the players we're talking about coming off the bench, that Justin has won 25 games in, that's still trying to figure out exactly what he's supposed to do when he gets on the court?
Yeah, I'll say so.
Go ahead, Brandon.
I think when we watched when we went to practice at the beginning of the season and we watched Justin McCoy, he was one of the better players out there.
Yeah.
He was definitely objectively speaking, he was one of the better players out there. And when you watch him in warmups, if you bought an alien from outer space and you just said, watch this basketball team,
you'd think he's a starter.
Yeah, they would think he's a starter. He's 6'8", he's long, and his jump shot looks really good in warmups, and he's athletic. But it's just when you get into the game, it's just confidence. Like Leaky Black said, at this level, everybody's pretty much the same. It's just what separates the best is the level of confidence. And right now, I just don't think he has a high level of confidence.
Deana, you played college basketball, and you can speak 100% to the difference between being a confident player and not being a confident player, because you kind of went through some of that yourself. Do you see that in Justin McCoy? Do you see that as an internal battle he's dealing with some right now?
Yeah, looking at the games, they will shoot to the bench, shots, TV shots at the bench, and you can kind of see like Justin there, like, you could basically see it in his face and everything. But just like Dontrez and Kerwin, all it takes is just a good bit stretch of positivity, and that could come in any time. And those guys need to realize that, hey, when your number is called, you need to get out there and be positive, do positive plays, because that goes a long ways in Hubert maybe putting you in another situation. And that goes back to that end game at Clemson, putting Puff out there in there instead of Justin, who is a 6'8", I call him more of a defensive player but Hubert went that way. So, but Justin,
he went with like I said, he went with the wiry, springy guy. You don't know where the pass is going to be. Someone who can react to something quickly and offer a little resistance to whatever Clemson was whatever was going to happen in that situation. Long, bouncy, that kind of thing. So I think that's why Puff was probably the perfect player to put in that situation. With Justin, I don't know how much you saw him play at Virginia. When Carolina got him, I didn't think starter, but I thought, here's a guy who could give them 10, 12, 15 minutes in certain situations. I wonder how much, and he was not a stretch guy, even though he did attempt some threes. I remember him hitting a three at Florida State one night early in the game before that one got out of hand last year. But how much of it do you think is more than just his confidence, but maybe not fitting into the 5 role at Carolina or the stretch 4 role at Carolina? He's just sort of an in-between guy, and just his skill set doesn't really translate to what they need from him. Or do you think it's all just confidence?
You had Brady and Dawson as those stretch 4s, and his game is nothing like Brady and Dawson's was. I mean, in fact, I don't think – I don't know what his shooting percentages were when he was at Virginia, but obviously they wasn't like Brady and Wade Dawson was. So he's just a kid just trying to figure out his role and everything, and he will likely find it eventually. It may be just fill in a few minutes, play good defense. Screen, because we've seen that part of the game be more vital in North Carolina's offense this year, and rebound, of course.
Let me add though that being at all the games, I have seen a guy that's very engaged during the game when he's on the bench. Brandon and I even noticed it during night at Clemson that when they were playing well, it was the first half and they started getting it going, and then Clemson called a timeout. He was the first one off the bench to greet the players coming off the floor. He talks a lot to starters when they come off the floor. Maybe he sees something going on and he's pouring it out to them. When you talk to Justin, you kind of get the idea that if he wants to be a coach one day, there could be a coach somewhere, a budding coach somewhere inside. So I do think he's been very engaged. It's just that that you guys know what it's like. There's a difference when you step on the field or step on the court. Yeah. And suddenly things are coming at you this way instead of you sitting by and just viewing everything as a keen observer. DeMarco Dunn's the last sub I want to talk about. We'll hit on him very quickly. My take on him is that, kind of like with Dontrez, my understanding all along is that he's behind defensively, taking some time. We've seen him in some games. He got a couple threes in the first half at Wake that he attempted but missed. They look comfortable. But he doesn't always look comfortable on the floor because he's in a growing and developing process. But also he's in a situation where look at the 2 starters in the backcourt. those guys aren't coming out unless they're dog tired, and Hubert needs to take them out because they're both, in order for Carolina to be the best they could be, they need both RJ and Caleb playing well and being on the court. And then you got Kerwin, a former starter who can fill in at the 2. And when he does that, the other guard is the point. So like if RJ comes out, Caleb moves over to the point when Kerwin comes in. So there's not a lot of space, not a lot of room, minutes to divvy up to DeMarco, especially now that they're going down to the home stretch of the season. And in games where 2 minutes or 3 minutes going the wrong way could cost you a game. So, Brandon, how do you see DeMarco Dunn fitting in the rest of the way? Or do you see him not fitting in at all the rest of the way? He's going to play a few minutes here and there. If there's routes, he's going to get some minutes. And this is a process where the offseason will be huge for him to earn a spot next year, depending on what the roster composition will look like.
Well, right now, I think DeMarco Dunn's I think his situation is very similar to that of Kenny Williams his freshman year, where it's just like you're playing behind so much talent that it's just hard to crack that rotation. But what I will say about DeMarco Dunn is whenever he is in the game, sometimes you're right, he doesn't look comfortable. But when he shoots the ball, he always looks comfortable. He hasn't made a high percentage of his shots, but when he's open, he's not afraid to let it fly. And I think
he's got a nice stroke.
Yeah.
And we were watching him the other day again. Brandon. He's got a nice stroke. He's another guy that after every game, he's out there getting up shots. And it's not just threes. He's getting up stuff off the left-hand dribble, off the right-hand dribble. He's working on his game and working on his rhythm. Go ahead, Brandon.
And last year, Caleb Love's freshman year, we always used to see him in the 3 Takes video. You always see Caleb Love in the background getting up shots. And you see how that's translated to this year. So DeMarco Dunn is following that same path. He understands the work that needs to be put in. And I think that's the biggest thing with both the freshmen. They both understand the situation they're in, and I don't think they're looking to run to the transfer portal to get playing time. I think they understand the legacy they have a chance to leave, and I think they understand the significance of the program that they're playing for. And I think that's important for any player that's playing at UNC.
Deana, before you comment, since people are going to grab onto what you just said there, we have no idea. And I've been told by people who are, kind of connected into certain ways that nobody knows anymore. Things have changed so much that it's so the portal, the one-time, anytime portal is so new that nobody really has a read on it yet. So I understand exactly what you're saying. Now someone could get into anybody's ear in late March, early mid-April and say, you got to go somewhere else, or who knows what else is going to come up, because there's a lot of shenanigans going on out there. But I get what you're saying. He's going about things right now that would give you no reason to think that he or anybody else are thinking about leaving. That doesn't mean that they won't, and it doesn't mean that they will. We just don't know. It's too early in the portal era to get any feel for any of this stuff. And I get asked, by the way, every day. I do my 10,000 steps in my neighborhood every day, and I've got Carolina fans who are neighbors, and it comes up almost every day, either out there or someone sending me a DM through Facebook. Like I got a friend request on Facebook like 4 days ago, and I accepted it. And 2 minutes later, that guy had a DM in my box asking me who's going to transfer. I'm like, I have no idea, man. I don't have a read on this stuff. Deana, what's your take on what we've seen from DeMarco and what expectations, if any, you might have for him the rest of the way?
I think DeMarco can look at the way that RJ has developed. RJ kind of last year, he's getting more playing time than DeMarco did this year, but it's that freshman to sophomore jump. DeMarco has time to work on a lot of things, and I think it's paid off for RJ, because we've seen much improved RJ in all facets of his games. Now he's finishing around the rim. Last year he was getting a lot of those layups blocked and everything, and he can look at RJ, possibly get some advice from RJ, because he did come in the position where North Carolina was, have a lot. And, I could even throw in, they can put Leaky back there to run points sometimes. and move people around and everything. So he's in a position where, Carolina has a luxury of a lot of shooting guards. And I've noticed when he is in the game, like Brandon said, he's a very confident shooter, but he's just learning to getting used to the college game. I mean, he from Arizona and he moved out here in North Carolina, played down there in Fayetteville at Westover, and played AAU with a lot of good talented players. But just the college game is different, and he's had to adjust like a lot of these kids do when they get to the college, that they're not the guy on the team. They have adjustment role. Everybody is the guy on their team until they get to, college. And I had to do that. I was the person at my school, but when I went to college, I had to realize, hey, there's people out here better than me, and I've got to learn my role and accept my role and try to get better to get out on the court. So it's a little transition for DeMarco, but he's got a lot of talent, and you've seen it because he's got a beautiful shot, and he can fill up the basket with the best of them when he's on.
I like the Kenny Williams comparison, and DeMarco is a little higher rated than Kenny was, but Kenny came in and had a wonderful attitude about it. It was tough for him at times, but he had a great attitude about it. And that Kenny Williams was all about the front of that jersey, man. And Kenny's one of my favorite guys I've covered, and unbelievable dude. And if DeMarco can have that kind of impact at Carolina that Kenny did, maybe. Remember, Kenny was a shooter. Kenny was a great defensive player. When Clint Jackson was our basketball recruiting guy, he knew Kenny really, really well, and he totally pegged it. He said, look, so this guy's a great defensive player. He's a really good shooter, but he's a defensive player. He's a guy that's going to lock down and take a lot of pride in that. And he called it. Clint was 100% right. Exactly the player he said Carolina was getting was a player that Kenny ended up being at UNC. Guys, I think that this was a lot of fun because we actually didn't talk about Caleb Love or Armando Bacot or Brady Manick or Leaky Black, and really not much about RJ Davis. We talked about something different, and that's why I love the whole story of the season. Brandon, I've told you so many times, a season is a chapter in basketball, or a season is a book, and each week is a new chapter. And here are these characters being woven into the storyline a little bit later into the book than perhaps people expected earlier in the year because the bench wasn't playing much. They still haven't gotten a ton of minutes, but it's when they're used, and it's what the Tar Heels can get out of it. And the fact is that the Iron Five is the Iron Five, or as Deana said earlier, the Iron Five. I think that's how you pronounced it. So I was scratching my head. What the heck is she talking? Iron Five? What's that? The Iron Five. The Iron Five, when they go on a road trip, Deana, they're going to go up in the R to go over the R. Those are my favorite, Deana. My daughter loves those Deana words. But anyway, they need these guys to contribute and play minutes. The statistics are secondary. They need to go out there, and if they're switching, they need to switch right. If they help on defense, they need to help right. If they draw a charge, get a rebound, deflections, little things like that, they must do those things. If points come with it, I think that'll be an added plus. And if they can do those little things, Hubert will be more inclined to give them minutes here and there. Because as we get closer to the end of the season, I think we could start look for Hubert putting in guys at the 9.5 minute mark for someone who gets that 1.5 minutes and then a full under 8 timeout rest and they come back in. As he gets more comfortable with inserting certain guys in the lineup, I think we'll see them get in more, maybe for shorter stretches, just to help kind of get these guys a little bit longer breaks. I think that's the next part of this process for the Carolina basketball team. Any parting thoughts, guys? We're closing this thing out.
I got one more thing to say. 2024 shooting guard Cam Scott, who recently got an offer from UNC. We did an interview with him over at THI. And I think if you're a UNC fan, you're going to really like what he and his family had to say. So you should go over to TarHeelIllustrated.com, subscribe, check out that interview.
Brandon's a pitch man.
Yeah.
Brandon's a pitch man. Brandon's trying to get additional wages here, Brandon, to go from 0 to 0.5, right? Or 0 to a half. I've got some loose change here somewhere. Let me see if I can get it for you.
I'm a team guy. I'm a team first guy.
Deana, what do you, and that, by the way, you're right. And we got Seth Trimble. We also got Gigi Jackson stuff. This is Monday. We're doing this all. If you'll be seeing this by Monday night, Tuesday morning. We got Cam Scott, Gigi Jackson, Seth Trimble stuff, all interviews them from this past weekend because they were all in Chapel Hill. Deana, any parting thought from you?
I think we said a lot. I mean, like, we didn't know we were going this route, but I'm glad we did. And it's we talked about some guys that are going to be really crucial and vital during this 6-game stretch heading into the ACC tournament, because we know Carolina is kind of on that yes, no line. I don't know what the bubble about some things. So they're
squarely on the bubble.
Yeah, they're gonna be a major part of where this Tar Heel team can make a push and get one of the top 4 seeds in the tournament in the ACC, and then from then on, we'll see. We got to see what happens.
I think my parting thought is we're going to learn a ton about this team Saturday in Blacksburg. Mm-hmm. We're going to learn a lot about what Hubert thinks of these kids that we've talked about today. We're going to find out if this team is ready to win a big road game. And Virginia Tech might not quite be Wake or Miami or Notre Dame or the other teams that Carolina's lost to, either at home or on neutral floors. But given what's at stake, I think this game is as big or bigger than those other ones, in part because they didn't play well in those other ones. So it makes this a huge game. But the Hokies are trending upward. They're creeping toward the line, the tournament line, and it's a must-win for Virginia Tech. They don't win that game, they're not going to the NCAA tournament unless they win up in Brooklyn. So Carolina must win. Carolina has to get a Q1 win, and the Hokies will be a Q1 road. It'll be a Q1 road game right up through Selection Sunday, which is less than 4 weeks away. And the Hokies right now, as we're recording this, are 38 in the NET. So they would have to go on a free fall to fall out of the top 75. So Carolina can match this one. Michigan can win a few games. I said we were going to talk about that later. We'll do another one on NET maybe next week. Michigan could win a few of these games again in these Q1 games that it has. Tar Heels could have 2 assured Q1 wins when they go to Durham, and who knows what will happen there. And we'll certainly discuss that as we get closer to the game at Duke and also the ACC tournament. And we're also going to do a spring football practice pod, the 3 of us, before spring football practice begins, which is just in a couple of weeks, guys. It's getting here pretty quickly. It's been warm the last couple of days, although not today. And it gave AJ a little spring fever. I'm chomping at the bit to wear shorts every day. So we're getting closer and closer, guys. So anyway, appreciate it very much. For Deana King, Brandon Peay. Oh, one more thing real fast. We've got a great thread on our message board. I asked the question last night in the middle of the Super Bowl. I went ahead and snuck it in there. 6 games left in the regular season. Project what the Tar Heels record's going to be. Very interesting what a lot of people are saying. But you must be a subscriber to participate and to read. And it's just $8.33 a month, which is the price of about 2 gallons of gas right now, unfortunately. So, don't go on that extra little drive once a week, and you could pay for your subscription to THI and see what everybody is saying about the Tar Heels projection for their last 6 games. She's Deana. He's Brandon. I'm AJ. We appreciate you stopping by.
Thanks.